Hey guys, this is Chris from DSX Machina, and you guys know me from Ultramodern 5, Amethyst, and this new board game that's on Kickstarter now, Naramata, A Game of Wine and Tourism. Now, if you've seen the game on Kickstarter, you know that it's based off a real region in Okanagan wine country, and I've been a game developer for over 10 years. I've been role-playing and gaming since I was a fetus. And I've been drinking wine actually only for about 6 years. I'm kind of a late bloomer, but I have a pretty large collection. And I know, and this is true, that Jamie Stegmaier, who from Stonemaier Games, who created Viticulture, is not an avid wine drinker. I've actually had a conversation with him about this, and he's not a big wine drinker. Here is my wine cellar. Now, it's not much of a cellar. For one thing, it's a storage area. It's the area underneath the stairs. I have a bunch of boxes of books behind me, stuff we take to conventions. I have this big thing which is used for gaming on occasion. I have wine all the way across this shelf and all the way across here. About 200 plus bottles. Once we add in my ice wine fridge, which we'll show you in a second. And this is almost entirely composed of Okanagan wine. In fact, I do believe this is entirely all Okanagan wine. I'm going to go through some examples just to make sure you guys are aware how serious I am about wine and wine collecting. This front region here, which is just off camera, we kind of the way my wife Nicole kind of organized this is to have it by region. So it's not in that it's kind of in alphabetical order, but it's also separated by region. So back here we've got North Vernon, Kamloops region, and up in the front is Osoyoos. So as you go from left to right, you're moving north from the border of Seattle all the way to almost Prince George, which is where I am. Although the Northern Lights Winery is not in this collection, it's in the fridge. So when we see stuff like here, in the very first one, this is Moon Cursor, which is probably the closest one that we have to the border to the United States. This is maybe 10 minutes away from the border. And that's Moon Cursor, for example. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll give you an example. CC Yench, I do believe this is a bottle from our first wine trip. So I think the year is, what is it, 2017? No, this is not from our first trip. That's probably something we picked up later. That's a different story. 2013 CC Yench. So this is something we've acquired from our first wine trip, which was in 2015. Like that. Quattro, 2012. Right? So I know some people can boast really old bottles, but that's not so bad. 8 years for Cassini Cellars Quattro. One of my personal favorites, Silver Sage, which is also out of the Osoyoos-Alva region. One of the things that we'd like to do with Naramata, the game, is potentially with an expansion include other maps around the same Okanagan region. Osoyoos being one of the first ones, because Osoyoos is also one of my favorite regions. Nicole's favorite winery, once we move past these three rows right here, which are Osoyoos, we go into something called Crazy Legs. Now, Crazy Legs isn't in Osoyoos. It's in another region just north of Oliver, just near a place called Okanagan Falls. Okanagan Falls doesn't get a lot of love because obviously you have Kelowna Wine Country, which is very popular, Osoyoos, and then Naramata. Okanagan Falls slots somewhere in between. Crazy Legs is Nicole's favorite winery, her favorite wine. So she does always keep some of theirs. This is a brand new bottle, but she's actually had some relatively old bottles that one of which she opened up for her bridal party. And I think she's opening another one on her birthday, which is coming up. But she always has quite a few Crazy Lake bottles in her collection. And the Naramata collection is probably one of the longest because it goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shelves. And then from here to the end is Kelowna, and then we have Vernon and northern areas there right up to Kamloops, and then of course we'll be ending with the Kamloops wineries down at the bottom. And these are trying to be in pretty good order, but I generally always have some D'Angelo. This is D'Angelo. This is one of my favorite wineries in that region. This is a 2012, so it's Tempranillo, so that's probably one bottle I got really early. The Dosh de Vitivianca, which is a very, very good wine as well. De Silva, which used to be called Misconduct. De Silva is another winery that I quite enjoy. Deep Roots, I would say this is no particular order because we went from De Silva, which is at the beginning of the bench, and to Deep Roots, which is near the end. I have a space here because I've drunken on Deep Roots recently. This is their Pinot Gris. Deep Roots is actually on the board. They're one of the signature wineries, and I love their logo. Red Rooster, they're just across from Ruby Blues. Kettle Valley, they've got a really nice view, and they've got really nice wine. I do believe Kettle Valley is the one that sells a Gewürztraminer slushy on site. Monster Vineyard, very popular bottles because they're actually etched on like this. I don't know what the term of that is, but that was very popular. They're owned by Poplar Grove, and they're really cool. They're shut down now because of COVID, but you can still buy their bottles at Poplar Grove. I have a bunch of Moraine, and Moraine are very popular. First time I went to Moraine, they were significantly smaller. Now they have a very large tasting room, which is really quite beautiful. And that's Cliffhanger Red. There's also Cliffhanger White. That's very well known. Very inexpensive and very good wine. Lang, one of the oldest wineries on the bench. They're actually, I think one of the original three. This is a Maricel Foch I just got recently. Wonderful selection. Another great view there on the upper side of the bench. There was an article talking about the most beautiful wineries in the world type of thing, or at least in North America. And I mentioned Terra Vista, which is very beautiful. And this is there. You can actually kind of see their winery as an image on here. It's a wonderful kind of concrete, almost brutalist type construct. It's very wonderful. But that's them. That's their Fandango. Newer winery out there, at least a newer from me, which is Origin, another place with a great view, and they have a bit of a drive up to the bench, but it's wonderful wine. Fortunately, not all wineries last. Perseus is no longer open. They were at the beginning. It's one of the first wineries. If you're driving from Penticton to the bench, one of the first wineries you'll encounter is Perseus. And you'll see the for sale sign, because last check, Perseus still has not been sold, and I don't know if it does get sold, if the new owners will be using the same name. So this bottle may be the last Perseus bottle in existence. We wanted to have them on the board because there was actually a spot for them, but I didn't realize they had shut down. Speaking of Poplar Grove, there's Poplar Grove. Always have a couple Poplar Groves in our collections. It's a very popular winery. Wonderful restaurant there as well. Once again, I was talking about wineries that don't stay open very long. A lot of times the wineries do get sold and they get picked up by somebody else, and then they use the same building, and then they rename the winery, and then they give it their own custom touch. And one such example is a place called Quidney. Quidney doesn't exist anymore either, like Perseus, but they were bought, and they were bought by these people, Westbird, and they have a spot on the board. They're another signature winery. So Quidney became Westbird, and personally, I kind of like this one more. Nicole really likes her Quidney, but I really like the Westbird. Their rosé is absolutely fantastic. Wonderful people as well. Like I said, they have a video and they're on the board as well. But this is shows the example. So once these Quidneys are gone, that's it for Quidney. But likely Westbird's still around. Another winery that's really close up. One of the signature wineries is Three Sisters. This is their Gewürztraminer. It's kind of an orange wine. Gewürztraminers are mostly known for being white. This is kind of an orange hue. I love this wine. Great location as well. Once again, in no particular order, we're finding ourselves at Therapy. Now, Therapy is once again on the other side of the bench. When we first did our first wine trip, we actually went all the way to the end and then drove back to the front. So Therapy was actually the first winery we visited on our first day in the bench. This is a 2015 Fumé Blanc, and that could actually be first year. Might have gotten that first year. Just like this one, the Super Ego, that's a 2014. I don't think their bottles look like that anymore, but they do. That's a Super Ego from Therapy. Another winery on the board, Upper Bench. They've got actually fantastic cheese, actually. I think I enjoy their cheese as much as I enjoy their wine, but that's their yard wine, their Upper Bench there. Bench, there's another bench. It's called Bench 1775. I think they probably have, from the lower bench, they have probably the best view from the lower bench. Like they have a fantastic position just near the lake. And this is them. You can't see the logo so well, but there it is, Bench 1775. A lot of people have a soft spot for Ruby Blues. Ruby Blues is also a signature winery, and that's them. My sister absolutely adores them. I think it's her favorite winery. I absolutely love them as well. We picked up a Magnum on our first trip, and we opened it for her birthday. This is a Red Stiletto. This is probably a newer Red Stiletto because the Ruby Blues don't last very long in our collection. Now, as you go further north, you hit Kelowna. Now, unlike all the other drives from the south to the north, you can't drive north from Naramata. Oddly enough, the road to Naramata ends exactly at the Naramata Inn. It just stops at the Naramata Inn. And there isn't a direct public road to continue from Naramata into Kelowna. So you have to drive all the way down south through Penticton and drive north up the other side. The areas are near Kelowna. There's two regions of Kelowna. Actually, there's four. There's a north, south, east, and west. And the west is most famous for stuff like Quails Gate and Mission Hill, and the east one have really wonderful ones like the View and Meadow Vista, and Camelot. And the north have 50th Parallel, which I probably is pretty far north. It's almost in the Vernon region for that one. And Cowbella is another one that's in the west, Off the Grid. That's also in the west. They're a nice little winery. One of my all-time favorites, which is called Rollingdale, and they're in Kelowna as well. In 2018, they came out with a very, very sweet estate Pinot Gris. And so I have a dozen bottles of that one. So it's probably my single favorite wine ever. But it was only 2018. So there's it. Once they're gone, that's it forever. I will never be able to drink that wine anymore. Nicole and I really love Ancient Hill. Ancient Hill is quite a bit north. It's almost as far north as you can before you actually leave that whole region of Kelowna. They've got a wonderful, wonderful location. I cannot suggest them enough. I mentioned 50th Parallel. There's 50th Parallel. When my wife and I went on a honeymoon just a few months ago in September, we actually hit 9 new wineries between the areas of Sycamoose and around the lake area there, just on the southeast of Kamloops, and we didn't realize there's a whole bunch of wineries there. And that's one of them, Bakata Ridge. And one of our favorites, Edge of the Earth. We actually have a whole box from Edge of the Earth. Really, really inexpensive, smooth fauche, wonderful little drive. It's really out of the way. You have to hunt to find it. And if you go far enough north, eventually you will get to Monte Creek. Now, Monte Creek is not the most northern winery in BC. It would be Northern Lights, which is in my hometown, but Northern Lights doesn't do grapes. Monte Creek does do grapes. So Monte Creek would I still be potentially the most northern. I think someone's going to tell me that, and I'd be right. The most north winery I'm going to say is probably Provato. Provato is, it's a bit of a drive north of Kamloops. It's on its own little road. We went there as a part of an exclusive wine trip. So that I do believe is the most northern winery that does do grapes. And once again, Gewürztraminer. And then here we are with my trusty wine fridge. The light doesn't work, so luckily it is cold. I can feel it. And you can hear it too. I have a bunch of games right there because this is basically my kitchen area. And I have another 20, 30 bottles in here. So these ones don't get opened nearly as much because I kind of forget that they're there. So some of these are actually probably quite old. For Lang, for example, this is probably an original bottle back from 2015. This is their maple, Canadian maple wine. This is something that I really, really enjoyed. Desert Hills. Desert Hills is another fantastic winery I didn't mention before, but Desert Hills is out of the Soyuz region. We actually were on their subscription list for a while. We're off of it now, but this is I would say this is probably first year as well. Inniskillen, very famous for having ice wines. They're actually between Oliver and Okanagan Falls, and that's actually a pretty large winery there because they share it with Jackson Triggs. Lulu Island, rather infamous. Lulu Island and Grizzly are two shared wineries owned by Chinese manufacturers. And Lulu Island is out of Langley, so this is not in the Okanagan region. Grizzly is in the Okanagan region because it's off of in Kelowna. But Lulu Island and Grizzly basically make mostly ice wines, and they crate them and then they ship them off to China because in China ice wines are extremely popular. Speaking of, there's the Grizzly. Silver Sage, this is also probably a first year. Doesn't say the date, but I guarantee this is probably from 2015. They are also good for their sweet wine. This is their Merlot just desert wine. The View from the Okanagan region. Monte Creek from Kamloops. This is their Pinot Noir ice wine. Monte Creek also does a Frontenac Gris. This is a very rare grape. You don't see that a lot in Okanagan because it's a very, very robust grape, so that it can survive in the colder temperatures, which is the reason why it's popular in Monte Creek because it's Kamloops is much more north than the other regions. Probably my single most expensive bottle is this bottle of Mount Boucherie Merlot ice wine. Mount Boucherie's in West Bank of Kelowna, and yeah, this was like an $85 bottle. Now, another winery from Naramata called Howling Bluff. This is their Forgotten Fort, because I have forts in here as well. You can see it's completely unlabeled. This is just basically hand-drawn. La Friends, which is a very, very popular winery in Naramata. This is theirs. This is their Liqueur Muscat. And that's from Naramata Bench. It's right there, Naramata Bench. Another winery that's in Naramata, which that we both love, my wife and I, is called Black Widow. I didn't see any bottles in there, so we must have gone through them all. But we do have their 2014 Mirage. That means this is something from our first wine trip. And it's still here. It's a fortified. It's a white fort, which is not very common, but there you go. Another D'Angelo, Tardiva of Viognier. I mentioned she's a big fan of Crazy Legs. Crazy Legs also does a line called Skaha, and this is one of theirs. We ordered another box that haven't arrived yet, but so this is going to get filled really fast with ports and ice wines. Another one I didn't mention before is called Single Tree. Single Tree is another winery that changed hands and changed names. It used to be called Ledland. They're actually next door to Westburt, and this is their Late Harvest Kerner. It's a little tiny cute little bottle, and this is from Single Tree, and they're on the board as well. And I had to throw out some love to my local winery. This is Northern Lights. Northern Lights is a fruit winery, and there are a few wineries on the bench as well. Elephant Island does a lot of fruit in theirs, and Silver Sage and Soyuz has played around with mixing and blends. Which finally brings us to this right here. This is our big wine liquor cabinet here. I'm not going to go into my liquor cabinet itself because it's just mostly just gins and whiskeys and so forth. And this is basically the only place where we have any non-BC wine. That's basically it. It's just what we have here. What we have up here are the few sparklings. We see Monte Creek, we can see Mission Hill, we can see Sperling, we can see Meadow Vista. And so we put all of our sparklings up here because we've been told it's easier and safer to keep your sparkling standing upright. Of just American and foreign here, and of course you have to show off Bouger Nouveau, because that's what you do every winter. You pick up a couple bottles of Bouger Nouveau, or Beaujolais Nouveau. That's the term, Beaujolais Nouveau. So that's it. That is my wine collection, and like I said, I am relatively serious about wine collecting. I like wine drinking, and that's why we go through our collection. And we like going on trips. We're going to go on another trip to wine country, Okanagan wine country, specifically Naramata, probably next year, mid next year, when we deliver the games to the wineries in the Naramata region. So yeah. Anyway, guys, like and subscribe, and if you can, check out the Naramata Board Game Kickstarter.